There are some thank yous in life that arrive easily. We say them too quickly without thinking much about it. But there are other thank yous that takes years to understand. The kind that only appears when we look back, when we remember a moment that once felt ordinary and realize that it wasn't ordinary at all. And suddenly we see things a bit differently. Because what felt like a small moment back then, it was actually shaping who we were becoming. I'm Wanya. Welcome to Mothers of Our Days. Today, our conversation around motherhood carries many emotions. Many things that mother did for us that happened a bit quietly. We didn't stop to thank them at that time. Sometimes we thought our mothers already knew what we were thankful about. Sometimes we thought that we had more time later to appreciate them. But as years go by, some things change. We began to see those moments a bit differently and begin to understand what mothers have given up for us. Slowly and quietly, a sentence forms in our heart. A sentence that many of us have carried for a long time. Today, those unspoken words, they finally find their voices in letters written by many. Because so many of us, we have a memory that begins in the same way. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for. Some people grow up hearing their mother call them in for dinner. Others grow up hearing stories about them instead. Here is a letter from a child to a mother that they never had a chance to meet. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for giving me life, even when I never met you. I grew up with stories about you, photos that I've studied longer than anyone realizes. There was this particular picture. You were standing outside like under the sun. Your head was slightly tilted and you had a very soft smile on. I've looked at that photo so many times. I stand in the front of the mirror trying to see if I resemble you. People say that I have your eyes. I don't know if that is true, but I hold on to it anyway. Growing up without you hasn't always been loud sadness. Sometimes it's a bit quieter. There are small moments where I wonder what you would have said. Like when something happens in my life, I think about you. I never really got a chance to say thank you in person, but every step of my life carries something that began with you. And that connection, invisible as it is, still feels very real to me. Thank you to a mother that I never met. Most children grow up assuming that their parents didn't really have a choice. But some children discover something extraordinary along the way, that they were chosen. Here is a letter from an adopted child to a mother who chose them even before she knew them. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for choosing me. I think I was about 10 the first time that I saw those adoption papers. I was looking for something in the drawer in your room when I found the folder. Inside it were forms, official stamps, dates, signatures, and there was a photo of me as a baby. And I was wondering. Then you walked in while I was sitting on the floor and trying to figure the papers out. For a moment, I thought I had done something really wrong. But instead, you sat beside me, quietly. You didn't rush to take the papers away. You just said, yes, that was the day that we brought you home. You started telling me stories about how you did everything, how long you'd been waiting, the forms that you had to fill, how nervous you were driving to pick me up. You said the house had been prepared for weeks. A small cot by the window with tiny clothes all sorted out for me. You wanted me even before you ever met me. Before you knew my laugh, before you knew my personality, before you knew anything about me. As I got older, sometimes I did wonder where I came from. Those questions still exist. But one thing that is never been uncertain for me is that I've never doubted that I was wanted by you. Not for a moment. Because your love for me, it began with a choice. And that kind of love is intentional. Thank you for choosing me. Some women become mothers by birth. Others become mothers by love, by patience, by opening a door to a child who needs somewhere to belong. To an auntie who became a mother figure. Dear auntie, I never thanked you for becoming my mother when you didn't have to. I remember the first night I moved into your house. I arrived with a small bag, but you were standing in the doorway as the car pulled up. You wiped your hands on your apron. Obviously, you've been cooking something in the kitchen. You said, "Come in. Your room is ready." I was so confused, I didn't know where to stand. So I walked in. The house smelled so nice. There were family photos on the wall. I remember sitting at the edge of the bed that you had prepared for me. Sheets were clean, the blanket folded, and you asked me gently, "Are you hungry?" I shook my head, even though I was, but you didn't push. The next morning, as I walked into the kitchen, breakfast was ready, just like I had always lived there. Then life slowly filled in around that very moment. You began to go for my school meetings, parents' evenings, took me to the hospital when I was sick, birthdays that you insisted that we celebrate. You stepped into responsibilities that they've never been a part of your original plan. And you never made me feel like I had disrupted your life. You simply made space for me. Quietly, steadily, that space became my childhood. Auntie, thank you for becoming my mother when I needed one the most. Some people open their homes knowing that goodbye will come. The love of a child anyway embraces that moment. These are words from a foster child to a foster mom who answered them with patience, with snack, and with a place to belong. Dear foster mom, I never thanked you for making a temporary place feel like home. I still remember the first night that I arrived. I came with almost nothing. It was the kind of packing and coming to a house that you just know that your life has been changed. The door opened and you walked right in. You had a smile on, not overwhelming, just gentle. "Come in," you said. The house felt quiet and you showed me my room. I remember stopping at the doorway. The room looked so nice. I wasn't used to that. There was a small folded towel and snacks on the bed. I stood there for a moment not knowing what to say. But you said very casually, "I wasn't sure what snacks that you liked yet." That word, yet, it stayed with me because it meant you were expecting to learn. You didn't treat me like a guest. You didn't treat me like one that was passing through your life. You treated me like someone who belonged there long enough to matter. You learned my favorite meals. You laughed at my jokes. You remembered how I liked my cereal, even though both of us knew I might not stay for a long time. And that's what makes your kindness so powerful to me. You invested in someone whose story you didn't have control over, even for a short time, for a child who had felt like they were passing through life. You gave me something that every child deserved, a place to belong, and that mattered more than you probably realize. Thank you, stepmom. Sometimes home disappears overnight, and the only thing that remains steady is a mother that is walking beside you. The words of a child to a mother who carried home wherever they went. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for holding our lives together when everything changed. I remember the day that we left. One suitcase, one small bag, and you holding my hand so tightly. We went to the train station and it was so crowded. People moving quickly. Voices in languages that we really don't understand. I remember asking you, Mom, are we coming back? You paused for a moment, then you smiled gently and you said, we will make home wherever we are. At that time, I really didn't understand what that meant, but now I do. Home was never just the place that we lived. Home was wherever we stood. You carried our sense of belonging with you, even when everything around us was unfamiliar. Mom, thank you for being our home when the world changed. Every new parent eventually discovers a powerful truth. No parenting book, it works as well as having your own mom around. Here is a letter from a new father to the mother who quietly stepped in. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for loving me in your own way. You were never loud with emotions. You didn't always say that I love you. But every 5 minutes, you reminded me that you were there. I remember each school day morning, breakfast was ready, my lunch was packed. The fruits all cut nicely. Sometimes you leave a small note folded in the corner with simple words like, have a good day. At that time, I barely noticed all of that. But I'll grab the bag and I'll run out of the door. But love was always happening in those small actions. The late nights when I came in, the quiet check-ins you do when you walk past my room, a knock at the door asking if I was okay. There was a time that I remember so clearly. I had missed the last bus home. It was late, it was cold, and to be honest, I was so scared. So I called you. You didn't complain, you just said, stay where you are, I'm coming. 20 minutes later, your car pulled right beside me. Mom, you were still in your house slippers. You must have left immediately that I called. You didn't make a big speech at all. You just handed me a warm sweater that you had brought along. I didn't always recognize what you did, but I do now. Thank you, Mom. Moving countries looks like an adventure to a child, but to a mother, it often means leaving behind an entire life. A child now writes to a woman who carried courage for both of them. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for leaving what you knew so I could have more. I remember my first day at a new school. Everything felt different. Different accents, different food, different routines. You stood at the school gate holding my hand just a little bit longer than usual, and you smiled at the teacher. But when I looked up at your eyes, they were slightly unsure. I didn't notice that then. I was busy worrying about how I was going to fit in. But later that evening, I walked into the kitchen and you were talking on the phone with someone back home. Your voice really sounded different, softer, familiar. You laughed in a way that I hadn't heard for months. Then you noticed me and switched languages so I could understand. Back to the one that you spoke. That was the moment that I realized something, that you had left a whole world behind. Friends who understood your jokes, streets that knew your footsteps, food that tasted like memory. And you stepped into unfamiliar systems, unfamiliar conversations, and into unfamiliar rooms so that I could have opportunities. I used to complain about my lunch, complain about how you pronounced certain words. I didn't understand what it cost a person to rebuild their life in a new place. But now I do. You didn't move for comfort, you moved for possibilities. Thank you for carrying that courage for both of us. I'm grateful. Some children grow up thinking every argument with their parents is a battle to win. But years later, they realize that the parent was fighting for them and not against them. A mother refusing to let their child lose their way. A son now speaks to a mom who refused to give up on him. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for not giving up on me when I made it very hard for you to love me. Growing up with me was never easy. I had a quick temper, a loud voice, and an opinion about everything. We argued about the smallest things. My friends, homework, curfews. Sometimes the arguments started over very little things. Just two strong voices in the same room. But there was this evening that I remember. The whole house could hear us, one of those arguments again. Your voice was even louder. You stood in the hallway pointing your finger at me. You think you know everything, you shouted. And of course I shouted back. I know what I'm doing, Mom. At that age, I thought shouting means you were angry. I thought it meant you didn't understand me. I thought you were trying to control my life. But the older that I get, the more I see differently. You were not shouting because you hated me. You were shouting because you were scared for me to make mistakes. Scared that I would choose the wrong friends. Scared that I could hurt myself in ways that you couldn't protect me from. And the truth is, some of those things actually almost happened. Looking back now, I realized something. Behind every argument that we had, there was a mother fighting for her son. You were fighting for my future, even when I made you exhausted, even when I walked away in the middle of an argument, even when I slammed the door. You never stopped showing up. You corrected me, you pushed me, you believed that I could become better. And now when people look at me to see the man that I've become, I know part of that strength was built in those difficult moments. You were shaping me even when I thought you were fighting me. Mom, thank you for not walking away from the most difficult version of me. Every family has someone who seemed to wake up before the sun, and somehow the whole house runs because of them. Read this letter to a mother who has carried the start of every day. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for the mornings you woke up before everyone else, to the smell of food. I must have been 10, I think. That morning, I came down the stairs, half asleep, but you were already there, standing by the stove and your hair tied back, your slippers making soft sound across the kitchen in that early morning. Our lunch boxes were already packed, shirts ready ironed for school. I remember asking you, why are you always up first, Mom? And you laughed. You said, because someone has to start the day. I didn't think much about it because it felt normal. Well, that's what moms do, I thought. They woke up first. But now, as I'm older, a grandfather, my knees are slower than they used to be. My mornings take longer to get through. And I sometimes picture you in that small kitchen, in the early hours of the sun and the kettle steaming. You began the entire day before anyone else even got to open your eyes. You carried the start of our lives quietly every morning. I didn't thank you then, but I thank you now, and I see it. Mom, thank you for every morning that you started for us. Sometimes the strongest leadership in every family, it looks very simple. It could be a mother turning off the noise or just calling everyone to the table. These are words of an older child of many decades, written to a mom who quietly held a family together around the kitchen table. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for the quiet evenings that you protected our family. I remember one evening in particular. It was raining outside. Dad was working late. My brothers were arguing about something small, as usual. The house felt a bit restless, like everyone was in a different mood. You stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes. The radio was playing softly on the counter. I remember you turning around suddenly and saying, "That's enough now. Everyone, come and sit down." We all gathered around the small table, and you poured tea for yourself, milk for us. And then you said something very simple. Let's just sit together here for a moment. No television, no rushing, just the sound of the rain and the ticking of the kitchen clock. At that time, I thought, this is boring. Well, I was a teenager. I wanted noise and I wanted excitement. But now I understand something that I couldn't see then. You were protecting something fragile, family time, connection, a moment where everyone was safe in the same room. Because life becomes busy, children grow up, people move away, and these simple evenings, they actually became very rare. But that one memory still stands clearly in my mind. The rain, the kitchen table, your calm voice slowing the whole house down. You were holding our family together in ways that we didn't even notice. I didn't thank you then, but I thank you now. Long before the goals, the trophies, or the confidence, there were the early mornings, the muddy boots, and a mother standing quietly on the sidelines. A son writes a letter to his mom, who believed in him first. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for all of the football runs you did. Some mornings started before the sun came up. You always had everything ready. My kit was washed and folded and on the chair. My boots were ready by the door. My water bottle filled up. You definitely must have been awake long before me. We take drives sometimes across towns even before the sun is up. The fields are sometimes muddy and sometimes it rains so hard, but you were always there at the sideline. Sometimes your hands tucked in your coat pockets, standing in the freezing cold, watching every move of the pitch and cheering. Sometimes you just observed quietly, but every time that I looked towards the sideline, you were there, always there. There was one match one day. I think I missed a shot. I felt so embarrassed. I glanced over the sideline, expecting a form of disappointment. But you were there clapping and cheering and shouting my name, still believing in me. Mom, my football dream slowly became your weekend routine, your early mornings, your long drives. But you didn't just drive me to practice. You built something inside of me. You taught me something deeper. Discipline, confidence, consistency, perseverance, all the things that build me even before I walk into a room. I have stepped into my adult life with all of this, and I chase new goals in life. When people ask me where do all my drive comes from, I realize that before I believed in myself, you believed in me. You have shaped every moment of my life. Without you, I wouldn't be here. Thank you, Mom. Every teenager is convinced that their mother's only hobby is to say no. But later they realized that she was actually saving them. Letter of a teenager. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for saying no when I didn't understand why. I remember one night standing at the kitchen doorway. I must have been maybe 16. My friends were going somewhere. A party, someone's house. I even can't quite remember right now. But I do remember that I really wanted to go so badly. I kept explaining that it was fine. Everyone was going. It wasn't far. Someone's older brother was driving. You didn't raise your voice. You just listened. Then you looked at me and said quietly, "No, I don't feel good about it." That was it. No speech, no dramatic explanation, just no. But I remember rolling my eyes, walking away, closing my bedroom door harder than necessary. I told my friends you were being difficult, overprotective, controlling. At 16, that's what it looked like to me. But now I'm older. Now I know what it means to feel something in your bones that your child cannot yet see. You must have carried that quiet responsibility all the time, seeing dangers that we could not recognize, reading situations that we thought that we understood at that time, and you had to say no, knowing that we would misread you. I didn't understand it then. I didn't thank you then. But I thank you now, because I now understand things that I couldn't see at 16. Thank you, Mom, for saying no. At some point in growing, teenagers develop a strange new language that made an entirely conversation just different. The eye rolling and the one word fine. Here is another letter from a teenager. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for not giving up on me when I got difficult. I know that the last few years haven't been easy. I've shut my door more times than I can remember, answered in one word replies, got frustrated when you asked me just simple questions. Sometimes I felt like you didn't get me, like you didn't understand the pressure that I was in. My friends, school, expectations, everything felt like it was deciding my whole life. But when I look back, you weren't trying to control me. You were keeping me steady. You didn't embarrass me in front of my friends. You corrected me privately. You called me out when I was wrong, but you didn't label me as a bad person. That made a difference. There were times that I messed up, like really messed up, and I thought that you would explode, you would be so upset. Instead, you sat down and said, "Let's talk." I didn't want to talk, but you stayed calm much longer than I deserved. You've seen me at my worst, but you were there. I'm almost an adult now. I act like I didn't need you in the same way, but I do. I just didn't know how to say it. Thank you, Mom, for always being there. Life has a very funny sense of humor. The teenagers who once defied every rule eventually becomes a parent that is setting them. These are words in the voice of a parent of teenagers to the mother who patiently raised him through it all. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for my teenage years. Last week, my daughter slammed her bedroom door. Whoa. The house shook. I stood in the hallway staring at the door thinking, that feels very familiar. I suddenly remembered myself at 15, exchanging words with you, always upset and frustrated. My dramatic opinions, the silent treatments I gave you even when you said something that I didn't like. Answering you with one word replies, acting like every rule that you set was so unfair. I thought that you didn't understand anything about my life, always overreacting, just too involved. Now that I have teenagers of my own, I totally understand. It's something that I couldn't see back then. You must have been constantly worried about me. The late night curfews, the friend groups, the decisions that you hoped that we made wisely. And somehow you balanced that worry with patience. You didn't give up on me when I was difficult. You stayed, you guided, and you waited for me to grow into myself. Now that I am standing in a place where you once stood, I finally understand how much strength that required. Thank you, Mom. Most of us have said something to our mothers that we wish we could take back. Years later, their words still follow us for the rest of our lives. Here is a child's words to the mother who taught them that once spoken, words never really disappear. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for learning the lessons the hard way. Things were not always simple between us. We had arguments, exchanging words, hurtful words sometimes, expectations that I didn't always understand. But I remember one particular evening. The house was quiet, except for the sound of you putting the shopping away. I said something very mean to you. I didn't think before I spoke. It was the kind of thing that silences the entire room. But you didn't shout. You didn't throw words back at me. You just leaned slightly against the counter and you looked at the floor. You were silent. That silence lasted longer than I wanted. And I remember feeling very uncomfortable. almost wishing that you would argue so I could argue back. But you didn't. Eventually, you said quietly, words stay longer than we think. And that was it. No lecture, just that one sentence. At that time, I just thought, Mom, you're just being dramatic. What's all that about? So I brushed it off. But years later, I see that you were right. Words do stay. Some heal, some linger like an echo. Some shape the way that we speak to others for the rest of our lives. You taught me that how we speak matters. You taught me that growth sometimes comes through uncomfortable situations. And even now, when I catch myself about to say something careless, I hear your voice again. Words stay longer than we think. I didn't thank you then, but I thank you now. Even when the complicated parts of our stories were there, it has shaped the person that I have come to be. And for that, I am grateful. No one ever tells you how awkward the first night with a new stepmom can be. Everyone trying to act normal when everyone absolutely does not feel normal. Here is a letter from a stepchild to the woman who stepped in and patiently built something real. Dear stepmom, I never thanked you for stepping into a place that wasn't easy. Looking back to the first evening that you moved in, it felt very careful, like everyone in the house moved a bit slower, not sure of how to act. The conversations were shorter. I was sitting on the sofa, pretending to be interested in the book that I had in my hand. You asked if I wanted some snacks. I said no, that wasn't true. But something happened in the weeks that followed. You didn't try to replace anyone. You didn't try to rush the closeness. You didn't force the affection. Instead, you did something quieter. You just showed up. You drove me to school. You remembered the snacks that I liked. You asked me about my day, even when you got one-word responses. Sometimes I was distant. Sometimes I made it very, very clear that you're not my mother. But you still kept showing up. That must have required patience that I didn't see then. And you chose to stay anyway. Over time, these small moments have come together and built something steady, something real. Stepmom, thank you for stepping into my life and choosing to care anyway. Every young man has a dramatic moment when he's ready to quit absolutely everything. And somewhere nearby is a mother figure whose one small sentence changes the direction of their life. Dear stepmom, I never thanked you for believing in me when I wasn't sure about myself. I remember the day that I almost quit my first job. I came back home frustrated, still wearing my work clothes. My shoulders were heavy with disappointment. I sat at the table and said, I'm not good at this. You were cooking. You didn't stop. You just slowly and quietly said, you don't quit on the first difficult day. I argued, I complained, I explained all the reasons why it wouldn't work, but you listened to everything. Then you said something very simple. Try again tomorrow. Never give up. That was it. Just calm confidence. So I went back the next day. then the next, then the next. That job became the beginning of everything for me. My career, my independence, my confidence. And it all began with one quiet sentence in a kitchen. Try again tomorrow. Never give up. Stepmom, thank you for believing in me when I hadn't learned how to believe in myself yet. When the world outside is scary, a mother's voice becomes that quiet place where children learn how to breathe again. These are the words of a child writing to a mom who became their shelter in the middle of chaos, whose courage stood while war was at the door. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for calming us when the world outside wasn't. There were nights where the sirens started and all we could hear were loud noises outside. The sound was so loud that we dropped everything we were holding. Everyone in the house literally froze, except you. You moved quickly but calmly. Shoes on, you said. Come here, children. You gathered us together. Your hands were steady. Your voice was soft. Even though your eyes kept glancing towards the window. We sat in the hallway, the safest place in the house. The sirens kept screaming outside. The loud noises did continue. But you started telling us a story. Something funny from when you were young. Something ordinary. And we laughed. Even though the world outside was terrifying. Only later did I realize that you were afraid too. But you chose courage so that we could feel safe. You carried fear quietly so that we didn't have to. Mom, thank you for being our calm in the middle of chaos. Sometimes heartbreaks arrive so suddenly that the world seems to fall silent around you. Nothing really prepares you for it. To a mom who held through grief when words couldn't explain. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for holding me when I had no words. The hospital room was very quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows you everywhere that you go and brings news that you did not expect to hear. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor when the doctor spoke. Most of the words really went past me. Loss, complication, recovery. None of it really felt real. My heart was heavier than anything that I felt before. Then you walked in. I didn't even look up. I really couldn't speak. I couldn't explain the kind of grief that comes from losing someone that you never got to meet. When we finally arrived home, I walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa. You didn't ask questions. You didn't say anything at first. You simply sat beside me. And then I started crying. The kind of cry that feels like it comes from somewhere deep in your chest. You didn't try to stop me. You didn't tell me to be strong. You just wrapped your arms around me and let me fall apart. For a moment, I felt like a child again. Small, held, safe. I didn't need advice on that day. I didn't need solutions. I just needed my mother. And you were there, just like you've always been. Thank you, Mom. Families are complicated. Sometimes love and distance, they end up living in the same story. Relationships can be complicated, but real. This is a letter from a daughter whose words they haven't spoken to mom in years. Dear mom, I never thanked you for the good parts, even though they were the hard ones. The last time we spoke properly was many, many years ago. I still remember that day. We were having a cup of tea together. Both of our teas were going cold. We were sitting across from each other, but it felt like miles of silence between us. There were things that we couldn't seem to say without hurting each other. Eventually, I stood up, and the space has been there ever since. But I remember how you used to take care of me, plait my hair before school, how you would stand by my door every morning and say, "Have a good day." I remember the way you protected me when I was younger, how you were worried about things that I didn't understand at that time. Our story has never been simple, and this letter doesn't fix anything. But today, I want to say something that has stayed unspoken within me. You still matter in my life, even when things were complicated. Mom, you were still part of my story, and you brought life to me. Thank you. Many of us grow up believing that mothers had endless energy. They're unstoppable, maybe even supermom, unaware of how tired that she must have been. Here is a teenager's letter written years later when they slowly begin to realize something different. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for being tired and still showing up. There was an evening, it was late, the house was quiet, and you were cleaning up. I came to get a drink of water. You were sitting at the table with a pile of bills spread out in front of you. Your glasses were slightly down your nose, and your head was resting in one hand. For a moment, you weren't moving. You just looked tired. It's not the kind of tired that a nap fixes, but it's the kind of tired that really sits behind the eyes, the one you can just see. And just then you noticed me, and immediately you straightened up. Did you finish your homework, you asked? Just like that, like the tired moment never happened. You went back to being a mom, cooking, answering questions, finding lost shoes, signing school letters. I didn't think about what your day had been before all of that. I just assumed that mothers had energy that doesn't end. Now I'm older, and I know how heavy life can be. Work, responsibilities, worry, and you still show up every day as if it were the most important task in the world. You must have been exhausted more times than I ever knew, but you kept going. I didn't say thank you a lot then, but I see it now, and it means more than I can explain. Thank you, Mom. One day, you wake up and realize something a bit scary. You've started sounding exactly like your mother. This is a letter, a mom to a mom, whose voice still lives inside their everyday sentences. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for everything. I only understand now that I'm older. Sometimes I hear myself speaking to my children in your own voice, and then I pause because the words sound exactly like you did. Take your jacket. Call me when you arrive. Did you eat? Growing up, motherhood really looked ordinary. Same routine, meals, reminders. Now, I realize how much thought lived inside all of those. Every decision, the way that everything was double-checked, the way I worried quietly about people, planning ahead. every small act of protection. I understand you differently now. Motherhood wasn't ordinary. It was an intentional way I did not recognize. And now I see it, and I see you differently too. If I didn't say it before, I am grateful. There is a special moment in life when a man holding his newborn suddenly understands everything his mother once carried for him. Here's a son's letter to the mother who showed up once again when life got a little bit overwhelming. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for coming to help when I became a father. The house was chaotic, bottles everywhere, laundry piling up. Here were two new parents trying to figure out what to do next. Then you arrived, quietly, with food, and you went straight into the kitchen like you never left, cleaning, cooking, tidying. You held the baby so we could sleep. At one point, I saw you standing near the window with my son, whispering something gently and softly to him. Probably the same kind of words that you whispered to me when I was little. That moment stayed with me. 3 generations in one room, and the same love continuing forward. Mom, thank you for showing up again and again when I needed you the most. Some of the most beautiful moments in life, they happen when motherhood stretches across generations. When a new parent eventually discovers a powerful truth that no parenting book works as well as your own mother being there. Here are a new parent's words to their mother. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for coming to stay at the arrival of our new baby. I remember the first night from the hospital. My wife had gone through surgery having our baby, so was still in the hospital. But I had come home with our son. I remember that night I sat at the edge of the bed wondering if I was ready for it, if I could do this. A baby, my son. The house felt strangely quiet because he was finally asleep. Then I heard something in the kitchen. The sound of a soft kettle. You were already awake making some tea. And even when the baby cried again at about 3 a.m., you were there before I even reached the door. You gently took him and you said, "Go and rest. I've got this." I watched you rock that tiny body in that dim light, just like you would have done for me. In moments that passed, something beautiful happened. Motherhood crossed many, many generations. You weren't just my mom again. You were my support, my calm, my strength, my teacher. Mom, thank you for holding both of us when we were new at this. Life has a very gentle way of turning in circles. A child who once held their mother's hand now becomes the one guiding her down the hospital corridor. This is a grown child speaking to the mom who taught them what strength really looks like. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for being strong when I wasn't. Recently, I took you to the hospital and was in the waiting room with you. You were holding your bag so tightly in your lap, the same brown bag that you've always carried for years. Your appointment card was tucked in carefully inside. I noticed how small that your hands now looked resting on top of it. Then the nurse called your name. You stood slowly and looked at me for a moment. It was like the same way that I used to look at you when I was small and when I was unsure. And suddenly, it hit me, and the roles have quietly changed. Now I'm the one reminding you to take your medications, taking care of you, checking that you don't miss any appointments. I drive while you sit right beside me. I see how difficult things must have been for you when I was little, but you were always the strong one, the one who carried everything. Now there are moments when you have to lean on me, and I want you to know that you once carried me, and now I carry you. I carry you to walk and to take every step. Even when it is heavy, it has never been a burden. It is indeed a circle, one life caring for another, a mother to another mother. And it's an honor to walk this path and journey with you. Thank you, Mom. Grandmothers have been a special people, and they have this very special talent. For I think about two things. They know how to feed everybody, oh my food, and they know absolutely everything about family history. Listen to these unspoken words of a grandchild to a grandmother. Dear Grandma, I never thanked you for holding our family together. Your kitchen table was the center of everything. I can still hear the sounds of your wooden spoon tapping the side of the pot while you cooked. You told us stories while you stirred. Stories about your childhood, about our family. Stories about how things used to be before I was born. Sometimes you'll stop halfway through the story and point a spoon at me. Listen carefully, you'd say. This is your history. You were strict sometimes. Oh, if we were late home, the front door stayed closed until we explained ourselves and where we're coming from. If we forgot our manners, you corrected us immediately. But beneath that firmness was something steady. Your house felt safe always. It was nothing fancy, nothing perfect, but always safe. Food was always cooking, and somehow, even during the harder seasons, you kept traditions alive. Stories that were passed down from generation to generation. You weren't just raising your children and grandchildren. You were protecting a whole family's memory, holding generations together with quiet determination. And that safety, it has shaped the person that I have become today. Thank you, Grandma. The strange thing about ordinary days is that we rarely notice them while they are happening until one day those memories come back and we leave them again. A child now speaks to her mom whose ordinary presence became a great loss. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for all the ordinary days that I took for granted. Being there when I didn't even realize that I needed you. Most of my childhood memories were simple ones. You just asked how my school day was. Me answering while I opened the fridge, not really always paying attention. Our conversations always felt small at the time. I assumed that those moments will always be there. Just everyday life. Another conversation, another dinner, another question about my day, another Saturday morning. I didn't know how quietly time moves. And suddenly, those ordinary moments will become something that I will miss. There are things that I thought that I would say to you one day. There are questions that I thought that I would have time to ask you. But time doesn't always give warnings. And now the house feels very different without you in it. Everything is still there, but it feels empty. Mom, you're gone too soon. If I could go back, I would sit at the kitchen table a little bit longer, listen more carefully. I would stay in those ordinary moments just for a while. I miss you, Mom. It's a strange thing about mothers. We spend our childhood surrounded by the small things that they do and only notice them properly when the house suddenly becomes quiet. These are words from a child to the mom whose love was hidden in 1,000 ordinary moments. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for all the small things I never noticed after you were gone. I noticed the first time that I walked into the house without you. The living room felt so different. The sofa you sat on was so empty. The little routines that once filled a day disappeared. I opened one of your drawers and I saw birthday cards, school photos, things that you have kept from our childhood, things that I didn't even remember giving you. And suddenly, I understood that you've been collecting pieces of our lives all along, holding memories together that we had already forgotten. I sat there for a long time looking at those small reminders of you. I wish I had said thank you a bit more often. But even though you're not here right now, what you have taught me had stayed with me in the way that I care about people, in the way that I speak, in the way that I show love to others. You are still a huge part of the way my life has turned out. And that means that your story continues. Mom, thank you for loving me in 1,000 small ways that I didn't see at that time. For every spoken letter tonight, there are 1,000 more that are still sitting quietly in people's heart. Because every person listening has a mother's story. Some stories are warm and close. Some are complicated. Some are filled with gratitude that was never spoken out loud. Some carry a quiet space where a mother used to be. We have different voices, different stories. But every one of them carries the same truth. A mother's love is often made of moments that we only recognize when we finally pause just long enough to take a look back. Today we heard the voices of children, young children, teenagers, adult sons and daughters. We heard the voices of someone raised by a stepmother, someone loved by a foster mother, someone shaped by a grandmother, someone carried by an auntie, someone chosen through adoption. We heard the voice of those who have lost their mothers too soon, and the voice of those who are only now beginning to understand them. We heard letters of mothers who stayed up late waiting for the front door to open, mothers who stood in the rain on football sidelines, mothers who crossed oceans for opportunity, mothers who carried families through war, through uncertainty and new beginnings, mothers who held their children through heartbreak, mothers who became grandmothers themselves, and to mothers who are still quietly showing up every single day. Sometimes tired, sometimes unseen, but never unimportant. Motherhood is not a break from purpose. It is purpose. Today, these letters have said something that many people they never got the chance to say. Thank you. Thank you to the woman who gave us life, who raised us, to the women who protected us, who stood beside us, to all the women who stepped in when life asked them to, and to the women whose love continues to shape us even when they are long gone. Because when we take a good look at this, every strength that we carry today, it began somewhere in the care of a mother or a mother figure. So today, wherever she is, she may be in the next room, across the world, or watching from heaven, we say these words that matter the most. Thank you for the seen and the unseen, for the ordinary and the extraordinary, for the love that we understood then and the love that we are only beginning to understand now. And if you remember just one thing from today, from this conversation, from these letters, I want you to remember this. Every life began with the quiet love of a mother or a mother figure. And the world is still standing because mothers keep showing up. If something in these letters touched you, I want to invite you to write your own letter. Start it simply. Dear Mom, I never thanked you for. The letter doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Just make it real. Express yourself in the letter. Subscribe and share this. Remember to turn on your notifications. This has been Mothers of Our Days, where every moment matters, every mother leads, and your story continues to unfold.